I'd like to give the floor to the speaker of this morning session, who is Miriam Sussan, and if I didn't pronounce your name well, you correct me later. Is a well-known German transhumanist activist, and I believe that she started running the Trans, which is the German Transhumanist Association. So again, thank you very much everyone for waiting, and I wish to give the floor to Miriam.
Good morning. Is it okay with the microphone?
Yeah.
Okay. Good morning, everybody. And I have changed my presentation 5 times. And this time I also decided not to really stick to my script, so I tried to improvise a bit. And I will start with some disclaimers because they're important, as I have realized. So first of all, it's Sunday, so I'm here on my free time. I'm not working. The following presentation reflects my own opinion and is not related to any non-transhumanist European institution. All project information being mentioned is publicly available on the internet. So if somebody is interested in some of the links and some of the publications, I can send some information. And I chose the colors for my presentation before knowing about the Italian futurists' color code. So it's actually a coincidence. So I also changed the title, and I changed it to Transhumanism Contributions to Humanity. And I put in a slide inspired by yesterday's presentation by Mike Trader. And actually, I'm operating where this red arrow is, somewhere between the mainstream and transhumanism. And I'm actually feeling more and more comfortable with this position. I've studied political sciences, and one major part of it was administration science. So I studied also administration. Many of my fellow students ended up in public administration or some other offices. So this is where I could also have been. But I decided not to do so and to go more into the direction of futurism. But I'm not really sure how to call this intersection right now, so maybe we'll find a solution how to really call it. Yes, transhumanism. Actually, if you look at it, it's about some wishes that humanity has expressed for a long, long time, but it didn't really have the technology. It is about healing the ill and healing the disabled, as it is also mentioned very often in religious scriptures and methodology. In the Bible, for example, where Jesus heals the ill, the blind, and the lame, and even resurrects dead people. It's also about longevity, like this Chinese picture you see. It's about the 7 immortals, and I found some scriptures in Hindu literature that is also talking about immortality, although there's a dispute if it's really about physical immortality or just about some kind of metaphysical immortality. And maybe if Egyptian ancient religions would have continued, maybe the Egyptians would have invented cryonics. I don't know. But at past times, all these nice things to live long and healthy, to cure diseases and disabilities were just wishful thinking because humans didn't have the technology to really make a difference. But now we're about to have technology that could help us to fulfill some of these wishes where our ancestors have dreamed about. So we're about to cure blindness, to help disabled people to walk again and to communicate. We're about to develop regenerative medicine and even perhaps advanced nanotechnology to solve many of our problems in regard to production, but also in regard to the environment. But strangely, the more we're developing these technologies, the more possibilities we're having, the more criticism is arising. And this is in a way a bit strange, but I will come to it later. So here's some examples of technological developments. Most of us are familiar with those. Human enhancement technologies, body modification, cyborg technologies, humanoid robots. Many countries are actually working in this area. It's advanced artificial intelligence, maybe even artificial general intelligence. And much of it also comes from developments in regard to semantic technologies, in regard to data mining, because people actually want to better interact with their machines, with the technology, and actually also want that the technology understands the human in a better way. Genetic research, tissue engineering, and lately synthetic biology. We are about to develop neurosimulations, neurotechnologies, virtual reality, research on life extension, advanced nanotechnologies, and we are in research on suspended animation, cryonics, hypothermia treatment, which is more and more getting introduced into commonplace medical practice. Transhumanism also raises old questions in totally new contexts. It's about questions like, what is life? What is death? What makes us human? What is identity? What distinguishes humans from objects and other animals? What should we do and what not in face of growing possibilities? Should non-human entities be granted rights? For example, in South Korea, there have started discussions about rights for robots, and how to manage technological and societal risks. And these old questions are now getting really practical, because now they are driven by actual technological and societal developments that are happening around us. So these questions should not be ignored anymore. So, and transhumanism is actually about bridging these ancient wishes I've talked about previously and the emerging technologies, like a wish for a long and healthy life, for prevention, cure of disease and disabilities, some improved capabilities, new capabilities for example, the capability to fly or to breathe underwater, and a better quality of life, which is often depicted, for example, in visions about paradise. And now we are about to develop life extension, regenerative medicine, advanced medicine, ICT, robotics, smart machines, nanotechnologies. And so it really wonders me why that now these new opportunities are opening, that they are emerging, that we see them on the horizon, but now the criticism about them is actually growing. And maybe this is also about a kind of psychological effect. Imagine that you actually want something but are not able to get it. So it may be a good psychological strategy just to say, oh, it's bad anyway, and it's sinful, and you shouldn't do or shouldn't have it anyway. So it may be very useful in a situation where you cannot get it anyway. But when now a new opportunity opens and you can get it, then this strategy is actually hindering you in pursuing your wishes and fulfilling them. So maybe this could be one explanation, but I guess there are also many others. So it's actually about technological possibilities. So I've tried to make a kind of picture for a technological possibility space. And it may go, nearly to the infinite, only restricted by natural laws as we now currently know them. Maybe we don't know even everything. Maybe there will be ways to tweak around with natural laws we now see as confinements, I'm not sure. But currently we only have the capability for a limited amount of technologies. And the capabilities are even greater than what is legally implemented. So we can also make a distinction between undesirable technologies and desirable technologies, whereas there may be a kind of shady area in between, where it depends on societal choices, on definitions, what may be desirable and what not. And especially in these shady areas, there needs to be a societal discourse about what to do, about what not to do, but based on rational thinking and taking into account the positive and the potentially negative side effects. And one technology can also have many dimensions. If you apply a certain technology, you can apply them to go to the undesirable part, but you can also develop the technologies to become more desirable and to design your concepts in a way to minimize risks and to minimize negative side effects. But also another important thing about transhumanism is, as I see it, is that transhumanists want to experience the technologies and the future they desire themselves, and therefore want safety and want environmental and social framework conditions that make life worth living in this future. So in many common mindsets, when I may call them that way, there seems to be a kind of disconnection from humans and the future and the life on Earth. So many religions, for example, consider life as a kind of hardship test for better existence after death. So there's no real interest in improving the current situation. Then there are some, I call them eco-fundamentalists, who even think that Earth would be better off without humans. Then there's parts of the sustainability movement that very often talk about the generations that come after you, but not really about your life now and your life in the future, because it's more about your action now has an impact on all these generations that come after you, but you are not able to experience its future. I think the thought of it is actually quite noble in a way, but it disconnects the people themselves from their actions, because it's getting too abstract, and it's totally different than if you want to improve your environment, for example, in order to have a better future yourself. Then there's secular humanism, which has some interlinkages with transhumanism, but humanism is very much oriented towards the current and limited human existence, and it's rather talking about making the best of your current limitations and your current existence. And as I've already told, transhumanism is actually about yourself experiencing your future, or we experiencing our future. So it actually connects the present state with the future, and that's what's also reflected in the shaping of the future that has also been mentioned in previous presentations. And indeed, transhumanists are already actively engaged in many projects that relate to humanitarian, environmental, and foresight-related activities. For example, the Millennium Project, that is very much about environment education, has a more of a humanist roots, but is also projected into the future. So then we have the Singularity University with educational programs about shaping the future. And then we, for example, also have the Lifeboat Foundation that is dealing with existential risks and also dealing with kinds of risks where other organizations are not really interested in because they're so long-term and not short-term enough to get real interest of policymakers, administrators, and the general public. But in a way, some of these risks that are discussed there have quite a probability to happen. And actually, it is better to prepare and to think about potential solutions than just wait and say, okay, it doesn't affect me, so let's other generations solve it. So that's about we want to experience a positive future worth living in. And that's actually not a zero-sum game. It's actually a win-win situation because it positively affects the present as well as the future. And over the last few years, transhumanism and related topics are being discussed more and more prominently and have already become more recognized. They're not that fringe anymore. So we moved a bit from the fringy side towards the mainstream. I already see it happening, also in regard to providing quality in and outputs. And some institutions that have dealt with transhumanism or transhumanist-related topics like human enhancement, synthetic biology, robotics, and so on are the Roberto Institute of the Netherlands. They are actually quite objective or even positive about discussing these issues. A bit more skeptical is the German Technology Assessment Organization to the German government. They are a bit more skeptical about transhumanism, but part of it is also just political correctness. When talking with the people in person, they're actually not that much against transhumanism as they may put out in public. And maybe we could also contribute to change it so that they dare to talk more positively about transhumanism without losing their face within their organizations. Then there are the European research technology organizations that are dealing with these issues, universities, for example, the University of Manchester, and EU institutions like European Commission and like the Science and Technology Options Assessment Institution to the Parliament and ministries, for example, the Dutch one. So this is one example of a workshop. I have not been directly involved in this, but it was a scenario workshop for so-called policy briefs. That's about emerging developments in technology and in society that could become relevant in the future. And as you see, transhumanism got a quite high score for the importance for the EU. It is considered of major importance after 2050 and as moderate importance by 2030. And especially high are the scores in regard to implications for people's life, legislation, regulation, science and technology. Less relevant in this score is environment and ecosystems, but I see it differently, and if I would have participated in this workshop, I would have also managed to get a higher score on that. And as you see, the people who attended this workshop were from universities, were from innovation centers, and there was also one contributor from the European Commission on that person. The whole policy brief is available on the internet. Down there, you see a link, but I think I can send you a better one. Or just Google something like "I know project transhumanism University Manchester" or something like that with file type PDF, then you will find it on the first and Google hit page. So I've also been on another project. It was about the future skills needs for people. Which skills should people need in the future? Which skills do people have to have in the future? And I looked at it also a bit from the transhumanist perspective. I've even written a short contribution on my blog, why companies should hire transhumanists. And I think that transhumanists are experts in a variety of scientific disciplines. They are interdisciplinary and they bring in a diversity of views, which is always considered as a very important competence for innovativeness. They connect science, technology, society, ethics, and foresight with each other. They bring in critical thinking, out-of-the-box thinking, and creativity. And creativity is considered as something very important for the future. They are concerned about the future of humanity and want to find solutions to grand challenges. And they really want to find solutions and not only talk about solutions, because it's also about their future. They want to find ways to foster progress and avoid risks, but in a balanced way. So in a way that progress can be achieved and not be hindered by being too precautionary. The issue is that if you interpret the precautionary principle in a much too strict way, then it actually can counter innovativeness, because innovation by definition is something new where you don't have a 10-year experience with. So actually Maximore's proactive, proactionary principle would actually be quite a good idea to solve this tension between innovation and between risk avoidance. And transhumanists are up to date. I actually haven't seen any other groups that are that much informed in a variety of things that are going on in new technologies and new societal developments, and are actually trying to keep up. They set high scientific and quality standards, which is often overlooked, perhaps out some prejudice. So this was my presentation, and thank you very much. So, questions? Yes?
Thank you for the excellent presentation. One question I have about what your opinion is about the feasibility of socially imposed limits on technology when one of Ray Kurzweil's points is that any limits on technology would just be circumvented, provide people practicing this state of technology underground or require some kind of fascist control to prevent that technology. And a lot of your presentation focused on these limits on social technology. So my question is, do you think it's, how do you respond to the Kurzweil that those limits are the cost would be too high to
The question has been, should I repeat the questions or?
Yes, thanks.
Yeah, the question is about the limits, the societal limits and societal reactions towards technology, for example, that if certain people want certain kinds of technology, that they could either try to do it in a kind of underground way by circumventing the legislation or the normal societal settings, or that other counter movements could just try to establish regimes that hinder the technologies. And I've been asked what my opinion is about it, also in regard to Ray Kurzweil. And I would say that I mean, it is, if something is technologically possible, and if enough funds and if enough human resources can be found, that in principle there can be found ways to establish these technologies, also if, say, the majority of the legislation is against it. But actually this is not, in my opinion, not the best view to, and the best way to deal with it, because I think that people should also be informed about the possibilities of the technology, and that people should try to remain within the societal structures to implement their ideas. And also, if something moves into the underground, so to say, of course, the danger may then happen that you also don't have a feedback about it, and that it then also could turn destructive. I will not say that it has to, but it could be. And therefore I see that also counter reactions may be good to improve the technology, but counter reactions should not be just because people are against it. It should be really about assessing the opportunities and the risks, and really on objective scientific means, and also try to go, as what I showed on the graph, to try to engineer the technologies in a way that it goes more towards the desirable direction than towards the non-desirable direction. Yes.
Any reflect on the future of politics and government systems, which is also should be part of
I think that actually transhumanism and transhumanist ideas should get the rightful position within the political discourse, just like the environmental movement, just like religious movements and other groups got the right to be represented, to provide their ideas within the political arena.
Within the existing system, but what about transforming this existing system? The system of states, of local governments, sharing resources all over the planet, things like this.
Yeah, in general, it would be a good idea to put forward these ideas, and also I deal with the old political structures that classically exist with left and with right and with liberal and with conservative. These don't really fit anymore, even in our time, and even less in the future. So actually we also need to rethink our political structure and look for more cooperation and not just for blockading each other. And politics should also actually get more long-term. The whole logic of the system should actually change, because now it's just politics for the sake of politics, but it's not politics for really doing anything on a long-term view. Yes?
I've been following your career with some interest in the last few years, and I read some of your articles and I heard some of your expressions. And I know that you've walked a very difficult path, that you want a lot of things, but considering your career, you are unable to realize that you have been treated very unfairly in Germany, from what I understand. Do you mind sharing some of your feelings about the way you have been censored in the past?
I'm not sure if I really would like to talk about it here in public, but some of the reactions, at least from university where I have worked, were really negative about transhumanism. I also gave presentations that actually stated facts of technological developments, and there I have been criticized that I haven't put in that it's all bad and that it's all undesirable. And I thought, why should I do it if it's not my opinion and if it's just a presentation about what's already there in the status quo? And the perception of transhumanism as such has been rather bad in the past. It's improving now, but there's still some kind of misunderstanding, and it may also be due to the communication of transhumanists, how it has been performed in the past, because it evolved rather like a grassroots movement. People were interested in their ideas, put them forward, and within the community people understood what has been meant. But to the outside, it was rather like, it has also been mentioned yesterday, like freezing heads and uploading persons. And this is the image that transhumanism had. And we are also dealing with some critical issues like genetic engineering, like nanotechnologies that are considered as risky, even the common nanotechnologies that are practiced currently. And also in regard to robotics, there are some criticisms which are, however, not really about safety standards, where I would have understood some concerns, but it's more about issues like changing humanity, about crossing borders. I also took a course in anthropology, and that was also stated that humans design some kind of categories, some kinds of classifications about what is taboo, what not, what is right, what is wrong, what belongs to nature, what does not. And transhumanism, in a way, transgresses these borders, and many people may feel uncomfortable with this, especially certain philosophers or social scientists.
Excuse me, Eric. We should not really take more questions for this talk, but I would like to give the opportunity to our friends who are watching from the internet to ask one question. They have not been able to watch yesterday, but there is one question they want to ask now, and I'd like to ask him to read the question.
Okay, this is a question from Next, isn't it? Cloning is banned. What if other emerging technologies will be criminalized by the governments as non-ethical? How real is that danger to the new emerging technologies, and for example, synthetic biology?
The question was that, for example, cloning is now banned, and if the same political reaction could also happen to other emerging technologies like synthetic biology. Yes, I am involved in some ethical debates about synthetic biology, and there are two lines of argumentations. One line is the safety and the security issue, which in my view could be dealt rather fairly well with, and which is actually not that different than with other biotechnologies and laboratory research. And the other issue is about the synthetic part, the notion of creating life and playing God on all these things. The issue is how to actually rationally argument on such a basis to ban technology. I mean, even with cloning, you can look even with cloning at the safety security side today. Our technology is not that good to really do it in a safe way. But when you are able, many of the arguments like that the clone didn't want to be a clone or looks like another entity or something like that are actually in a way invalid if you look at identical twins. No one is really concerned about the identities of identical twins. And who has asked you if you want to be the person you are now? I mean, your parents also didn't ask you if you want to be the way you want to be now. And in regard to the legal issue, I think that there needs to be some kind of counterpart to these ethical argumentations or religious argumentations that also bring in other views about the issue. And I think that it's invalid that one argumentation or one worldview should dominate. So we need a counterbalance to that.
Yeah, thank you very much. Okay, so we have lost a lot of time. This is not Miriam's fault because she has exactly on time, but due to technical problem this morning. Now it is the time which was foreseen for the break. But we have many interesting talks to listen to, and the show must go on. So I would like to invite everyone to take a very short break, but by very short, I really mean 5 minutes, and to come back here in 5 minutes to listen to the next speaker, whose talk is, I think, going to be one of the most interesting of the conference. So I look forward to seeing you here in 5 minutes.
And transhumanist drag. Well, the Italian transhumanist drag is, you understand the term drag. You're in a drag. Sort of. This is presenting as something other than what you are. physically. This is a joke.
And then, do you want to use your computer or move the PowerPoint?
The slides are already on this machine.
The slides are already on this
And
machine.
we've checked.
So you want to show from this machine and you want to read from
I'm
it?
going to read from this one. Cable, indeed. Cable, who's got the cable this morning?
Today the graphics tool is driving
We have a website
yeah.
Sorry, Venus Plus, it's like Columbia is the main what we do.
Yeah, Columbia was the foundation of your Columbia is a project that you already had since
Venus Plus X is doing business as because Columbia is not a trademark.
I see. Right.
Columbia expresses our
I see. So Venus Plus X is going to be an
to
album.
own the world.
That's a beautiful title. Venus Plus X is an album name for the center.
It is the name of a science fiction novel written by Ray
Right.
in the 60s.
Right.
Which the future is completely androgynous.
I should have forgotten that it was one of my most loved science fiction.
It's very hard. Well, I have the slides, and the slides have the entire talk embedded in the notes.
Right, so you want to read the...
I mean, it's in the notes so that you can distribute the slides and the notes together. It's a simple
From the album, this microphone.
Right, you need to be here first, of course.
Wait, I'm often across this, so I'm just searching if I have found here or something. Yes, it would be depending on which phase. Maybe it's around rather the second half of January or the first half of
Okay, ladies and gentlemen, can I have everyone's attention, please? So back to your seats, because now we're going to have a series of very interesting talks. Well, you're supposed to do that after the talks, not before. Let me, for a couple of minutes, let me give him the time to eat the cookie because she has been working a lot. It's really a pleasure to introduce the next speaker, who is a real Renaissance man. He has written a lot of things, he has seen a lot of things, has done a lot of things, and he has a lot of interesting projects for the future. Short-term future and the long-term future. It's a pleasure to introduce Dan Massey.
Okay.
In America, we have a slang term called drag, which refers to dressing and appearing as something somewhat different than what you may be on a different level, perhaps in some. I realized at this conference that there was a dress standard for transhumanism in Italy. And since I already was dressing a lot in black, I decided I should appear in transhumanist drag. Therefore, I have the yellow ribbon in front. You know, I have a desire to be sympathetic with what this is all about, although I admit to being a definite newcomer to the field. If you don't mind, I'll dispose of this now, but I wanted to let you know that I really do sympathize with what we're trying to do.
No worries.
The slides I will present are intended to help you follow the talk by summarizing the points. So let me begin. Love is. Love is the original source and final destiny of all that is. Love is the infinite, eternal, and universal sustainer and activator of all that is and all that occurs in time. Love is the source of the most perfect thing as well as the most perfect action. Love sustains a perfect universe outside time and space. Love is demonstrating the progressive construction of a finite universe within time and space. Such a created reality, through the manifestation of active love, will evolve to perfection from imperfection. This finite universe will always be imperfect in some degree until it finally achieves simultaneous perfection across all space. And it is this imperfection that limits the action of love prior to the achievement of final destiny. Love's purpose in this adventure of the finite is to develop a perfectly coordinated finite reality which is personalized as a supreme being, a deity equal in power and personality to love, yet existent in a temporally evolved finite universe. Love the finite. The body of Love the finite is our own universe, populated by vast numbers of love-conscious creatures who constitute the distributed soul of this vast deity in whom we literally are and live. These creatures are organized in a vast cosmic government that attends to the needs and functions of groups served by the government. The material will creatures who Till that end of time, we all experience imperfections in the universal presence and action of love. Those who do not understand see these imperfections as evil, even active evil. Yet what they observe as active evil is merely the dynamic fluctuation of the contours of the temporary boundaries on the presence of divine harmony within physical reality. The consciousness of finite will creatures is designed to respond to the ideal of love as it may be expressed in the personal, spiritual, mental, and physical levels of experience. Love, a personal value, is the desire to do good to others, expressed as goodness, a spiritual value. In turn, goodness is informed by truth, a mental value, while truth and goodness together empower the creation of beauty, a physical value. These four, truth, beauty, goodness, and love, are the intended directors of perfected human behavior. These supreme values find expression on the spiritual, the mental, emotional, and the physical and sensory levels of human experience. On the spiritual level, We engage love through worshipful communion with the very personal ministry of total and reciprocal love. On the mental emotional level, we engage love through prayer and thanksgiving and receive the guidance through the very personal ministry of the living truth. But what is the nature of our engagement with the actual consciousness of love on the physical and sensory level? The observation that one's first response is plain demonstrates how little our culture knows of the true nature of love on this level. It is not difficult to supply an answer, obvious, though perhaps unexpected. On the physical sensory level, we engage love through physical acts of pleasure and receive the unbounded joy of direct contact with the full power of divine love expressed through human senses and nerves. The most basic direct act of physical pleasure is the erotic, through which we finally receive sensory testimony to the fullness of the experience of love in the joy of orgasm. At every level of experience, the product of our engagement with love is augmentation of our potential to act in accordance with the supremely coordinated plan for our universe careers. In particular, it finds expression in increased love, the desire to do good to others, and active service in the doing of that good on each level of our experience of finite reality as we strive to be effective agents of the finite love. On the physical level of reality, this takes the form of physical love, the service of erotic sensation and the acceptance of orgasmic joy. Thus, we have no concern in declaring to you today that the erotic sensation and orgasmic satisfaction are fundamental and unalienable gifts of love to humanity, and these gifts serve manifold purposes. They provide the most basic form of access of the human organism to the unlimited consciousness of love. From this access flows the inspiration to the physical nervous system that prepares the embodied mind and memory to seek and to find continuing contact with the channel of the spirit of love, through which the mortal mind is willingly engaged in the great work of living and acting in accordance with one's best understanding of the divine will. Throughout human history, social bullies have used the denial of this unquestionable reality to oppress and control those who meet to assert their most fundamental and divine rights to erotic experience. The effect of this has been to limit fellowship with the divine to those able to know love in their minds and emotions without the active engagement or participation of their physical mind. In fact, almost all elements of all human societies actively engaged in suppression of the abilities and opportunities of their citizens to experience and share erotic love. This generally prevents all of the most reflective and already spiritually oriented individuals from placing active faith in the goodness of love because they have been denied free and spontaneous access to the genuine experience, and even taught that seeking such a divinely ordained experience will disqualify them from divine love. No greater lie has ever been foisted on the pitiful, ignorant, frightened, and hostile humanity. Those who have always opposed human social and spiritual progress stand before the universe government convicted of total iniquity in every aspect of their being. No purpose is served by the preservation of such beings, nor do they deserve a role in the enlightened discourse and inspired leadership of humanity to realize its potentials, which have so long been denied to us by the malign influence of these social and spiritual bullies. The achievement of human planetary destiny depends upon our taking bold action now to show humanity a true vision of cosmic reality that rises far above the foolish superstitions and mythologies and customs of human societies. And the most important of these actions is to inspire all humanity to embrace the divine gifts of free erotic expression. Exactly what are these gifts and what is their mode of expression? First and foremost is sexual identity. No body is perfectly male or female. Human genetics produces bodies with a rich and highly multidimensional set of characteristics, some of which are perceived by others, which we understand by applying a unidimensional model that opposes male to female. As long as we understand that there's a continuous range of values for sexual identity of real bodies, that is an extreme simplification and condensation of the multidimensional reality. This dichotomy of degree, this ratio scale, can aid understanding. However, if we force this dichotomy into a classification model, an ordinate scale, or even a simple binary model, we deny the reality of the true personal sexual identity of almost all individuals, except those very few whose overall physical presentation lies at the extremes of male and female. Second is sexual orientation. From your personal viewpoint of freely presented sexual identity, what sexual identities are most erotically attractive to you? Again, the reality is that no one is perfectly heterosexual or homosexual in their sexual orientation. The binary classification model, which declares that all must be labeled either straight or queer, creates an insane dichotomy from which there is no factual evidence and for which the social bullies take their model for oppression of the meek. Undeniably, since the work of Kinsey, and largely since the work of Hertzfeld, we have known a part of the richly multidimensional space of sexual orientation, where the multiple factors defining sexual attraction to a person of unique sexual identity can interact with each other in an endless variety of ways, showing the uselessness and meaninglessness of classification at the second level of erotic free expression. Third, and hardly appreciated at all, is social affinity, often reduced to gender affinity. People find attraction to others at levels richer in meaning than mere sexual identity and orientation. Just as people vary widely in the somatic expression of their genotype, they also vary widely in their personal behavioral approach to integrating into a social structure and cooperating with others. First, through genetics alone, and later through cultural reinforcement of a genetic predisposition, people establish empathic relationships with others in society. These relationships tend to be defined by a few readily identifiable dimensions, although there are surely many more. There is a scale of affinity possible for such factors as aggression, nurturing, selfishness, healing, leading, and so forth. And each person is drawn to others who intuitively share these ideas. And it is the community of psychic or empathic identity that defines the varied forms of social affinity. When humans view the vast range of personal expression possible for their fellows, they find that the empathic affinity groups in society appear to be associated with specific, narrow ranges of sexual identity, and the labels of the defective social model of sexual identity are then force-fit to these affinities, resulting in certain areas of social affinity being simplified down to the community of men, hence the males, and the community of women, hence the females. And thus gender labels become assigned based on social affinity that may be inconsistent with the individual's sexual identity. And transgenderism is thus an area where social affinity intuitions are in conflict with the socially perceived sexual identity. But this has nothing to do with the reality of an individual's experience and only reflects defects in an almost universally accepted model of the world. Social stereotypes of gender roles provide a further avenue for social and economic bullies to deny people the right to choose their own community of intuitive affinity, reaffirming the individual's powerlessness and emotional as well as prior literal enslavement of the human mind and emotions in service of a debased and evil model of real emotional love. Increasingly, we see and affirm the fundamental errors and incompleteness of the social understanding of communal love. Fourth, since social roles are commonly gender stereotypes, social affinity naturally gives rise to gender identity. That is, the communities that share a common social affinity, or individuals within those communities, find their own gender identity. But it need not be male or female. It will almost certainly be androgynous to some degree, and is, in the final analysis, just another point along a scale that stretches from the wholly cisnormative to the wholly transnormative, since the underlying and unmodeled multidimensional attributes assure that no one can be purely cis or purely trans in their most comfortable and spiritually compatible gender identity. The popular insistence that if one is not cisgender, one must be transgender, and thus a candidate for a complete recipe book of transsexual medical procedures and treatments in order to achieve personal fulfillment, results in bizarre legal practices, legal strictures on gender identity, further enslaving the meek by forcing them to accept the inevitably incomplete efforts of primitive plastic surgery in order to acquire the legal documentation that will allow them to attempt to achieve the social acceptance by forcing sexual identity into conformance with a very limited set of choices of gender identity. Surely, any person deserves the inalienable right to the gender identity and presentation that best represents underlying personal choices and affinities independently of any personal desire for specific body modifications, which may or may not be related to sex and gender presentation. Fifth, because of the confusion between sex and gender, a person will exhibit a gender orientation, which must lie in the range from the purely heterogender orientation to the purely homogender. Yet, there is no compelling reason gender orientation must lie at one or the other extreme. Confusion at this level arises often in conflicts between the homonormative cisnormative community, which is gay men and lesbians, and the homonormative transnormative community of trans men and trans women, in the expression of a shared homogender orientation. The social oppression of the four previously discussed levels has created a false dichotomy that places members of the oppressed majority at odds with each other over fundamental issues of social and erotic acceptance. In total, these absurdities of social classification and overdefinition strip the most inspired and creative minds in human society of the ability to find happiness and social acceptance equal to that of their less visionary fellow citizens. The most ignorant and unproductive and unempathic elements of society rule without intellectual or spiritual merit, knowing nothing but force, which is the method of all bullies. The future spiritual, social, economic, and material technological development of life on this planet depends on the ability of all members of our society to fully embrace the power of performing energetically willed action in accordance with the will of love. And the key to this is the complete liberation from the neurotic structures of false social models of sex and gender that serve no useful function apart from enabling the oppression of the meek by the unworthy, the bullies. Erotic stimulation, especially orgasm, comes into play as the mechanism by which the physical body, the nervous system, and the meat brain become first motivated and later fully engaged in commitment to action implementing the will of love. It is one thing to know what needs to be done and something else to get your body off its ass and actually do it. But if the body understands in its very gut that this is all a part of getting better sex, then the body will get with the program much faster than the disbelieving mind or the fearful spirit. And that provides the power of faith that energizes the higher levels of being so they can develop to better inform the individual seeker of the best path to the always improving and increasingly joyful ecstasy of contact with the divine. In short, human beings will finally desire to learn to celebrate their existence by having sex with love. Consciously willed erotic engagement with the personality of the divine presence that lives within our individual minds, as well as that presence in the minds of our erotic partners. Physical love in all its immutable forms lays the foundation for full vertical integration of body, mind, and spirit in a healthy and sane personality, able to truly live continuously in the presence of living personal love. I suggest that a rational view of cosmic reality, uncorrupted by myth, fear, and ignorance, illuminates the manifold transhumanist visions and allows us to identify low-hanging fruit. That is, those opportunities that will find ready traction in the spiritual, intellectual, emotional, and physical sensory domains of human experience. Vast amounts of research and development are needed to bring many transhumanist visions to practical realization. The resources for the more dramatic innovations must be provided by exploitation of what can be readily inspired, engineered, and profitably marketed. The acceptance of unrestricted but mutually desirable sexual and gender freedom and equality opens the gate for accelerated development of erotic spirituality, romantic thinking, and seductive technologies, enabling the practical and effective realization of physical, sensory, sex, and gender desires. From this point forward, we can anticipate exponentially expanding a mission of erotic inspiration, of logical understanding, and of sensory seduction to bring all humanity who will to a fully integrated experience of love's unlimited love for each person whose heart is open to the spiritual guidance of the living truth. How does this model of human, social, and sexual organization and potential support the greater transhumanist vision of the human future? I submit that the rationalized cosmic vision I presented addresses the personal concerns of individuals to be able at will to be self-conscious of individual personal existence from now forward to the end of time. We will live but one life in the physically simulated reality we experience through our material senses. Those of us who have chosen the only immediately available form of finite personal immortality, as well as those who might have so chosen had they been given the chance, find reincarnation in a near physical body constructed in a domain of energy presence and action that is barely manifest at all within the electromagnetic spectrum, which is the immersive environment in which we are first born and learn to seek contact with living love. And this body is but one of the many we may possess in a long future of personal growth, until we are able to function directly without any physical interface to the finite. The transhumanist vision of personal human immortality is readily achievable by anyone who so chooses to make the approach through spiritual means. There is no long-term value in personal human immortality as material life on Earth, because the opportunities for growth and development would be exhausted in a few billion years, leaving the earthbound human effectively trapped in physical existence at the bottom of a deep gravity. Rather, our personal identities enter the transphysical level of sensory experience. We are free from these limitations and begin entry into an eternal experience of learning and growing through the application of love in service to others. On the other hand, the option of unlimited prolongation of useful human physical existence beyond its current meager duration would surely be of benefit in the acceleration of human progress on this planet, while continuing to provide ample opportunity for continuing personal growth for those who remain to serve, if human society were first to be free from fear, ignorance, and bigotry, which makes so many tales of routine living oppressive and obnoxious. Prolongation of personal presence by downloading the human mind into a machine presents unique problems of spiritual technology that may be very difficult to understand and resolve. I am certain that if we first release the collective consciousness of humanity from the chains of erotic denial to the physical body, which denies us the ability of impulse to freely love our fellows, humanity will be able to unite its efforts and finally understand the subtle processes by which spirit controls mind, mind controls literal reality, and personality integrates the operation of all three into coherent, worthy desire and supremely effective action. We who live here today and hear and understand these ideas know that empowered by the spirit of love, all sane and potentially loving humanity will be drawn to the personally enabling power of full acceptance and enjoyment of complete freedom of sex and gender identity in relation to society, thus finally enabling humans to fully engage in loving cooperation, free from the malign manipulations of psychic bullies that have cynically established false dichotomies to divide beneath and set them against each other. One need only consider the incredible waste of human lives and resources in wars of the last 2,000 years to know that the presence of anti-erotic bullying is the principal obstacle to human progress. While we have witnessed the overthrow of one class of bullies by another, as in the wars to achieve representative government, and the overall trend superficially appears positive in the pulpit of the bullies' press, we can see in events of the past year the climax of spiritual deterioration in the United States of America and other national governments, to the point that they have become morally and ethically incapacitated, unable and unwilling to take any meaningful legislative, administrative, or judicial action to inhibit the fanatically theocratic bullying which seems to herald yet another return to worldwide fascism. I tell you that the time has come to open wide the doors of erotic freedom that lead to a new age of human cooperation and empowerment, free from the false moralities, false theologies, and false regulatory strictures of the past, and built upon a foundation of physical sensual love between individuals and between individuals and the spirit of love itself, who shares all our experiences and will show us how to make them better if we will only pay attention. Our task, therefore, is to inspire, educate, and seduce our fellows through this new and better way of living, loving, and being, which will finally energize human unity and progressive motivations, enabling us to work together for the full realization of our planetary destiny. Such an effort will finally change the hearts and minds of humanity, causing the abandonment of the foolish superstitions that dominate current thinking and behavior. To accomplish this, we will prove the effectiveness and efficiency of our future vision in the three principal areas of cultural development: the spiritual, the intellectual, and the sensual. In the spiritual, we declare that the erotic is a gift of love to man, by which it is intended that the human experiences of physical love guide the individual on the path of friendship with true love. To the intellectual, we demand that liberty, freedom, justice, and equality are unalienable individual rights with which no human association may interfere in any way whatsoever. For the sensory, we demonstrate that the erotic foundations of a loving society can be strengthened to enhance the human experience of sex and gender through rational research, development, and application of technology. By simultaneously addressing all three domains, we make possible the concurrent realization, harmonizing these diverse initiatives of the highest reality of love. At the same time, we override traditional moral and theological traps set by frightened fools who would deny the joys of knowing love to all humanity in order that they may enslave the deepest human desires to serve their own delusions. We will be announcing more specific details in the next few months and invite correspondence with interested parties. We anticipate our first public symposium in early 2011. In closing, we assert in finality that love is the law, the desire to do good to others. Will is the enabler of love as service, the doing of good to others. Together, they are today establishing a new age of truth, beauty, goodness, and love for all humanity. I realize that what I said did not answer a couple of important questions that would come to mind in a transhumanist discussion. The first has to do with the issue of downloading human consciousness. How can ongoing speculation about downloading include ongoing concerns about the legal rights of artificially supported or created individuals benefit from the revelation of the cosmic importance of erotic freedom. I'm an activist. I did not present these ideas as speculations on nature or reality. Rather, I present them as necessary truths about the nature of reality that are ready for immediate implementation. I am personally dedicated to their implementation and have no reason to compromise these truths. Anyone who finds resonance with these concepts should adopt those that are personally useful. Anyone who finds no resonance should simply disregard this discussion. The question that necessarily pervades current transhumanist thinking about simulation of human consciousness can only be addressed if a person about to have their life vehicle voluntarily be destroyed in the downloading process can be convinced that they will regain consciousness with a continuing sense of personal identity. I have no idea how this can be achieved. Perhaps we should examine instead the simpler question of whether an artificial simulated cognitive system can function as a human and therefore be entitled to the legal and social rights that adhere to that state. It seems to me that the most basic issue is whether the artificially constructed identity is able to know, love, and take direction from the divine. Certainly, this is a minimum prerequisite for an artifact to host a personality of human spiritual complexity. The human brain is an evolved finite state system, being evolved to be surely subject to improvement, either through direct engineering or construction of an artificial equivalent. Being finite, yet able to love, it is reasonable to consider that an improved equivalent will be possible, and such an equivalent will also be able to love and potentially enjoy full legal and social rights, which must necessarily be based upon spiritual consciousness. The foundation of such consciousness is the ability to experience erotic experience and orgasm. Design an artifact that can experience orgasm, and you have the beginning of such a possibility. I believe that in the distant future, spiritually directed human discovery will eventually lead us to this state. When we create such artifacts, we will have created beings of equal spiritual status to ourselves, and will have performed one of the many functions of love. In this sense, at least, humanity will have achieved creative identity. The other question I thought might come logically to people's mind is what the future physical transformation of human life experience of the erotic could be once such desires are fully linked to mutual love between humans and between humans and love. The opportunities for enhancement of the human experience of sex and gender are numerous. These emerging technologies represent the most immediately available source for commercial and financial support for the support of sexual liberation, since they provide services that many people would desire to be part of their physical identity. At the most basic and immediate level is the research and development and commercial exploitation of an expanding market for sex toys. That is, artifacts that interact erotically with the human sensorium. A large variety of masturbation machines already exist to address the male and female desire for autonomous stimulation and orgasmic release. Both mechanical and electrical stimulation methods are being worked on in garages around the world, but there is no seriously constructed program of research and development. The future holds not only better machines, but also machines that can provide haptic and proprioceptive interaction between machines and human senses. Such equipment will be digitally interfaced and make teledildonics a genuine, usable technology for individuals, couples, and polyamorous groups. But this is in only one area of potentiality. Erotogenic pharmacological products can also be developed. At present, we see the emergence of new products, such as bremelanotide, which is already an effective human aphrodisiac, though further research on safety and side effects is needed. Serious pharmacological research on such compounds can open up a vast commercial opportunity. Long-term research should enable us to systematically modify the human genome so that physical androgyny can become the standard. Such a development could be simplified or improved by technology that permits extracorporeal gestation and frees the human species from the trials and uncertainties of insemination, pregnancy, and childbirth, forever freeing the exploitation of human erogyny from the animal traditions of reproductive sex. These are just a few of the possibilities. The development and commercial exploitation of what can be achieved today will provide the funding for the realization of a continuing evolution of the human erotic sensorium as we experience movement in time towards an unrevealed erotic destiny.
So as I had announced, this has been really one of the most interesting talks. I'm sure there's going to be many, many questions from the audience. As a matter of fact, I had many questions myself, but I'm not going to ask any question because unfortunately we have to move on in the program. I have Dan's email address. I hope to see him later today. And I'm sure we will be discussing this for long. So I'd like to invite everyone who doesn't have any real pressing question that has to be answered now to stay in touch with Dan, to talk to him later, to ask for his email address and to continue talking to him. They're going to take one question. And the first one is that. The only one.
Make it a good one.
First of all, I wish to say thank you, Dan. It was an amazing presentation, and I believe immensely important for the future of humanity. But as an aside, I was thinking about artificial intelligence, and maybe you should devise a test, the Massey test, to equal the Turing test, but to test for orgasms. And
Special Chinese food.
yes, yes.
Oh,
And actually, I mean, it sounds funny, but it may be that at the end of the day we will discover that the true test of intelligence is orgasm. And it may be that to find the correct measurement for intelligence, we will need such a test. And this was inspired by you.
Well, I thank you for that comment and remark. The suggestion is that, based on my presentation, that orgasm must in some way be a foundation of human intelligence, and that perhaps one of the ways to evaluate the presence of true intelligence is to determine how the substrate experiences orgasm. And to that I can say, I believe that's true. I had not thought of using it as a component of measuring intelligence, but as you see, the measure of all characteristics of personality involves many dimensions on many levels, and it strikes me that's a really creative thought to incorporate in this, and I thank you very much for it. And I will also say that I will be here the rest of the day with my partner Allison, who was a major contributor to this presentation, and we will also be here all day tomorrow if anyone is around. Thank you.
Okay, so please don't worry if you are running late, because we'll be able to recover the time. And the end of the afternoon session today was forcing for 5. But of course there is nothing which prevents us to stay until 6 or 6:30 if there are some missing talks. So I'd like to invite everyone to stay here for all today, because we do have the conference room for all today. Now, I'd like to announce the next speaker, who is one of the first modern Italian writers and thinkers who wrote an actual book, and is really a very thick one and a very interesting one about transhumanism and post-humanity. It was already many years ago, and that was the text that has permitted many Italian readers to have their first exposure and introduction to transhumanism. I'd like to introduce you Roberto Marchesini, who is a well-known Italian biologist, writer, thinker, activist, and so many other things that he does. We have, since the talk is going to be in Italian, I see that we have a full translation through. And by our president of the Italian Transhumanist Association, Riccardo Campo, and Julia Bodini, who I want to thank again. She's always here, and I'm happy to announce that she will also be the talk. In closing, I see that Roberto has a special guest who is a non-human friend, who is now sitting or sleeping in the back of the room. He's a very nice black dog. And we have been discussing artificial intelligences, post-human intelligences, so many non-human intelligences, but of course we should never forget that there are non-human intelligences here on this planet. Now, I have a dog myself, a lot of their inaction. I think we as transhumanists, we should also become the animals. So I'd like to give the floor to Roberto Marchesini, who will be Riccardo first.
I just want to say one more word about Roberto, because there are many people claiming I wrote the first book on transhumanism. This happened in Italy, it happens in America or wherever. Some people may think, well, the date should be an objective element to decide. But of course, there are many discussions: what is transhumanism, what is posthumanism, and that's what people claim to be first. But I must say, and one of them was me, but I must say that he was first in the sense that very often are the publisher writing on the book. This is the first book that they have to sell it. Actually, I think he was really the first writing a book. The title of the book was Post-Human, and his perspective is interdisciplinary. It's both philosophical and then biological, and so I think it's really very, very interesting.
Bene, vado là. Bene, io ringrazio la vostra presentazione di essere qua e farò una breve introduzione a quello che è, a mio avviso, l'aspetto più importante della visione postumanistica, che è quella di superare i concetti antropocentrici, e non ne avrò di slide, parlerò direttamente con voi.
Thank you for this opportunity. I'm going to do a short introduction about what I consider the most important aspect of the posthuman vision, which is the exit from the anthropocentric concepts or vision of the...
Sì, diciamo che siamo stati abituati negli ultimi 30 anni a prendere in considerazione l'antropocentrismo solo sugli aspetti etici. In realtà l'antropocentrismo è una grande ipoteca interpretativa, soprattutto per gli aspetti epistemologici e ontologici.
We consider anthropocentrism in the last few years only from the standpoint of ethics, but I believe it's a much wider landscape.
No, non posso fare.
Sull'aspetto della conoscenza, sull'aspetto che l'essere umano non è misura del mondo, non può essere considerato misura del mondo.
On the knowledge aspect, and on the knowledge aspect from the standpoint that the human cannot be the measure of the world of reality.
Ogni periodo storico ha avuto, diciamo, dei paradigmi di riferimento. Nel mondo greco, per esempio, le grandi motivazioni dell'essere umano erano perfettamente accettate, non c'era un senso di colpa sull'ambito dell'erotismo quanto dell'agonismo.
Each historical period has had its own paradigm concerning the knowledge. The Greek world, for example, the great motivation of the humans were fully accepted. There was no guilt concerning, for example, erotism, agonistic.
Possiamo dire che il periodo medievale ha avuto una visione fortemente rigida, geocentrica, con la presenza di Aristotele come filosofo centrale, e quindi diciamo che è una visione molto statica quella del mondo filosofico medievale.
The Middle Ages were very rigid in view, with Aristotle being the principal philosopher, and yes, with the geocentric perspective.
L'età moderna si apre con la visione umanistica ed è una visione che fonda la libertà dell'uomo sull'antropocentrismo.
The modern era opens with the view of the world and of the human based on anthropocentric perspective.
Possiamo dire che l'idea di l'uomo di Vitruvio di Leonardo da Vinci è forse l'esempio più chiaro di questa visione. L'uomo di Vitruvio è una specie di compasso che misura il mondo e contiene il mondo.
The famous drawing of Leonardo, the man of Vitruvio, can be the best example of this anthropocentric perspective. It's a human that is the world, contains the world, defines the world.
Tutto l'umanismo assorbe l'idea che l'essere umano sia un'entità incompleta che si completa attraverso la cultura, quindi che la cultura sia una stampella che va a supplire l'imperfezione dell'essere umano.
Humanism absorbs the fact that the human is not complete, is not perfect, and culture is the completion, is a tool in completing this imperfection.
E questa è una visione che diciamo ci portiamo dietro anche fino al Novecento con Arnold Gehlen e con l'idea dell'antropologia filosofica, che in qualche modo continua a pensare alla cultura come una sorta di completamento della carenza o imperfezione umana.
This is something that goes with the humanity until the end of the 19th century, where culture keeps on being a completion with non-perfection.
In questa visione viene completamente fuorviato, cambiato, mal interpretato la visione darwinista dell'evoluzione come correlazione, come specializzazione. L'evoluzione diventa una sorta di corsa di progresso.
And this is where the Darwinian ideas are being misunderstood, and they become basically a run for progress, for success, fitness.
E anche la tecnologia, la tecne e la tecnopoiesi viene vista come uno strumento, cioè diventa uno strumento, quello che permette all'essere umano di mantenersi puro.
And even technology is being interpreted in this session as a tool for completion.
Ora questa visione inizia a cadere alla fine del Novecento, gli ultimi decenni del Novecento. Potremmo dire che, come altri paradigmi, riprendendo la poetica di Philip Dick, è un universo che inizia a cadere a pezzi nell'ultima fase del Novecento.
At the end of the 19th century, this perspective begins to fall with the narrative of Philip Dick.
Sì. Posto? La visione postumanistica parte dall'idea di un rifiuto del concetto ontologico di purezza e dell'idea che ogni identità è un'identità ibrida.
Posthumanism begins from the refusal of the concept of purity and of the idea that every identity
È un'identità ibrida.
is a hybrid identity.
E il non umano, che sia animale o che sia macchina, non è un oggetto, ma un partner.
And the non-human, whether animal or machine, is not an object but a partner.
Capace di modificare la nostra stessa biologia a partire dal sistema neurobiologico al sistema immunitario e a tutti i sistemi biologici di conoscenza.
Able to change our own biological system, from the immunitary system to the biological system to
Lo strumento, cioè l'alterità non umana, in altre parole, si incarna nel nostro corpo sempre.
alterity. Alterity?
Otherness.
Otherness. The otherness, the otherness in terms of non-humanness is embodied within our humanity, always.
Si incarna, proprio carne.
Incarnate, is incarnated.
In questa visione chiaramente la concezione antropocentrica viene a decadere per un motivo molto semplice, che la dimensione umana si costruisce attraverso un antropodecentrismo, non attraverso un antropocentrismo, cioè un allontanarsi dal fulcro, non un gravitare dentro al fulcro antropocentrico.
This vision, the anthropocentric vision, collapses because the becoming is not seen as a falling upon the gravity of the anthropocentric view as much as going far from the fulcrum of this vision, of the core.
Ora, è molto importante capire che il rischio di interpretare in maniera umanistica la tecnologia non porta a un postumanismo, un transumanismo, ma porta a un iperumanismo.
The risk of interpreting technology in a humanistic fashion is that it will not bring to a posthumanism or transhumanism, but to an extreme humanism.
Nel senso che le cornici, le speranze, sono ancora quelle umanistiche di Pico della Mirandola, di Marsilio Ficino, sono ancora quelle immagini angeliche, sono quella idea dove l'autorità è il mostro, oggi è il mostro da cacciare, oggi invece il mostro è qualcosa che è in noi siamo dei mostri.
To become an extreme humanism in the sense that the frame of motives and ideas are still the same that belong to Pico della Mirandola and to the images of this period, in which the image is a kind of angelic image, it still goes towards the idea of perfection, and the monster is, and the other is a monster, the different is a monster. And the monster, in this case, while dealing with this perspective, the posthuman perspective, we begin by saying that we are monsters.
non dobbiamo avere paura del mostro, cioè non dobbiamo ripetere l'errore della ricerca della purezza, che l'umanismo ha costellato tutto per 600 anni. Questa ricerca della purezza ha creato morte, disperazione, sofferenza. Noi dobbiamo capire che la purezza è stato il grande errore, l'idea che umano e antropocentrico fossero la stessa cosa. Non è così.
We shouldn't be afraid of the monster, because we can look at what the quest for this purity and perfection of the last 600 years has created, which is mostly death and devastation and desperation. And it was an outcome of the misunderstanding that anthropocentric and human are the same, and they are not.
La storia dell'uomo è sempre stata un allontanarsi dal centro, è sempre stato un'odissea la storia dell'uomo.
The history of the human has always been about getting far from the center. It's an odyssea, it's not.
E Itaca è sempre stato un pretesto.
And Ithaca was always a pretext.
Noi ci allontaniamo da questo centro e accettiamo non solo il bene che ci può arrivare da questo allontanamento, ma anche l'inevitabile sofferenza, la nostalgia, ma noi amiamo la nostalgia.
We are getting far from this center, but we accept also the price of this getting far, the suffering that comes with it, the nostalgia, that we love nostalgia, we like nostalgia.
L'idea che è ancora umanistica è il pensare un futuro fatto solo di gioia, fatto solo di amore, fatto solo di piacere. Non c'è piacere se non c'è anche da una parte una fatica, un progetto. E questo, l'accettare anche questo, insomma, il futuro è un futuro aperto nel bene come nel male, è un futuro aperto. Noi dobbiamo accettare questa apertura tutte le volte che ci allontaniamo da Itaca.
We have to accept that the future is an open future, is an unknown future. We have to accept this each time we go far from Ithaca. And there is again the possible mistake of interpreting the future as a place of only joy and only pleasure, but for real there isn't only joy or pleasure without the work or the effort to go there.
Allontanarsi dal fulcro antropocentrico, allontanarsi da Itaca per l'uomo è stato costruire un sistema in non equilibrio. Noi siamo un sistema in non equilibrio, per questo siamo un sistema evolutivo.
To get far from Ithaca, to go out of Ithaca, from the fulcrum, the human has had to build a system which is a system of non-equilibrium, and this is what we are. We are a non-equilibrium system, and this is why we are an evolutive system.
Quindi dobbiamo dimenticare l'idea di raggiungere una situazione di staticità, perché quanto più ci ibridiamo, tanto più saremo in fibrillazione, in movimento. Noi amiamo questo movimento, noi amiamo questa fibrillazione, ma non pensiamo che la tecnologia crei una compensazione, che in qualche modo ci rassereni, ci compensi. La tecnologia ci aumenta la fibrillazione, aumenta questa nostra capacità di movimento, di non essere fermi, di non essere statici, di non gravitare, ma di, come degli aquiloni, volare.
We have to forget the idea of static, of equilibrium, in the sense that we are a dynamic fluctuating system, and technology will not compensate this, it will increase it, and it will make us even more a system in movement.
Le alterità aprono nuovi spazi, nuove dimensioni dell'essere, ci danno la possibilità di accedere a nuovi orizzonti, entrare in geografie che non conoscevamo.
Otherness is giving us the possibility to enter new dimensions of being, and new dimensions of possibilities that were not existing before.
Ora, quello che io noto è che ci mancano gli strumenti per comprendere quello che la tecnologia ci può dare, ci mancano gli strumenti interpretativi, siamo ancora con una mentalità meccanica di fronte alla tecnologia informatica, ci mancano gli strumenti interpretativi della tecnologia, così come non conosciamo gli animali non perché gli animali sono stupidi, è perché noi non abbiamo la capacità di capirli.
And I wish to note that I believe we do not have the instruments, the tools to understand technology, to realize which are the kind of advantages that it can bring. And in the same fashion in which we do not understand animals, not because animals are stupid, but because we do not look at them in a fashion that can allow us to see.
Noi possiamo continuare a imparare dal non umano, possiamo continuare ad allargare il nostro mondo, sapendo tuttavia questo, che una concezione postumanistica ci porta a vedere la conoscenza non più come dominio, ma la conoscenza come coniugazione, come bisogno. Ed è questo il grande passaggio. Ci rendiamo conto di aver bisogno degli altri per realizzare noi stessi.
We can continue to go far from our original world, keeping in mind that the posthumanist vision
che la visione postumanistica cambia l'idea di sapere come dominio, da un sapere come dominio a un sapere come coniugazione, un sapere come bisogno.
that change the idea of knowledge as a dominion, as a domination, to knowledge as conjugation, to realize that we need each other.
Knowledge as a verb.
As a verb.
E questo passaggio a mio avviso ci porterà piano piano a guardare in maniera diversa il non umano e ci porterà a in qualche modo comprendere come effettivamente siamo sempre stati postumani.
And this passage, in my opinion, will bring us to understand the other, the non-human, and to make us realize, as for real, we have always been posthuman.
Grazie.
So as before, we are going to have one question for Roberto Marchesini. Read first. The question myself, what's the name of your beautiful dog? Il cane che è così bello, che ha giocato con tutti, come si chiama?
Si chiama Pimpa.
Pimpa.
What is the name of your beautiful dog that plays with everybody? Pimpa.
Ed è un grande ibridatore.
He's a great type.
I have a question. Since here we are talking about mostly about technology, but you told us that the non-human, you remind us that the non-human is also animals. What do you think we can learn from animals? I mean, just a few things that you think we should take into account to improve our existence.
Certo, noi abbiamo sempre imparato dagli animali, nel senso che la danza l'abbiamo imparata, sappiamo che tutta la danza africana, danza Massey, nasce dall'osservazione dei rituali di corteggiamento della gru coronata. Abbiamo imparato dalla...
Let's translate this part, please.
Yes, we have always learned from animals. We know, for example, that in Africa the dance is coming out of animal observation.
Coronata. E abbiamo imparato anche l'uso degli psicotropi dagli animali.
We also learned the use of psychotropic substances from animals.
Prima di inventare l'LSD, le popolazioni eschimesi osservavano le renne che si facevano di amanita muscaria.
Before inventing LSD, the Eskimos were watching the animals.
Renne?
That were eating
Amanita muscaria.
Amanita muscaria.
Abbiamo imparato dalle capre l'uso del caffè.
We learned from goats the usage of coffee.
Abbiamo imparato dagli elefanti l'uso dell'alcol.
And from elephants the usage of alcohol.
Democrito già diceva che abbiamo imparato l'arte del tessere dai ragni e la costruzione della carta dalle vespe.
Democritus was already saying that we learned the art of weaving from spiders and the art of paper from wasps.
Io penso che la tecnologia del futuro sarà una biotecnologia, cioè sarà una tecnologia che si ispira al biologico, che cerca di realizzare in maniera artificiale, in maniera tecnopoietica, però diciamo la logica e la filosofia del biologico.
I believe that the future technology is a biotechnology that will inspire itself from the organic and the animal technology, but bio.
Quindi potremmo dire che gli etologi forse potranno essere gli studiosi che ci insegneranno nuove prospettive comportamentali per l'essere umano.
So maybe the science of animal will be the one to teach us new perspectives.
E del resto anche l'arte sta andando in questa direzione, penso ad Daniel Lee, penso a Matthew Barney, penso a tanti autori che hanno visto nel loro passaggio, nel loro transumanare, una costruzione ibridativa con il stereomorfo, con lo zoomorfo.
I see also art going in this direction with the combination with the zoomorphic aspect.
Okay. Any other question? He used a very interesting word, transumanare, which is a very old Italian word invented by Dante Alighieri, so in the Middle Age, 700 years ago. It's transcending human nature. So transumanare, this is a very old Italian word.
Bene, grazie.
Thank you very much, Roberto. Thank you very much, Pinta. If you could please go back to your seat, because we're going to restart. We're making many changes in the program on the fly. So the next one is not very Pearce, who is emailing me his PowerPoint presentation right now. The next one is very well-known French journalist and writer. The author of one of the few books about transhumanism published in French, Les Utopies Posthumaines. He's a good friend of many of the people here. I'd like to introduce you the next speaker, who is Remi Sussan. Let's load your PowerPoint. It should be
sull'appendice.
Everything okay? Everything's okay?
Yes, that's great. I go? Okay. So, you have seen this yesterday, and we see this every day. There are strong relationships between transhumanism and religion. Is this bad? Is this good? Anyway, anytime you speak about transhumanist projects, there will always be somebody who will say, yeah, you want to become like a god. Is it not something religious? Are you not some kind of sect or cult? And indeed, there is now some thoughts of thinking in transhumanist circles about this relationship. It was more or less taboo a few years ago. Transhumanists were rational, they were scientists, no religions admitted. Now, Giulio, for instance, has created the Order of Cosmic Engineers and the Turing Church in order to think about the relationship between transhumanism and spirituality. So perhaps it's now the time to think about religion, spirituality, the sacred in this context. I will not do a presentation about transhumanism as religion. Roberto did one excellent yesterday. I will try to understand, to explore what are those muddy waters of religion and the sacred. If we have to dig in this, we'd better to understand how it works. So I try to hack the sacred, enter in the nuts and bolts of religious thought. So I will try to ask 3 questions. First, is religious thought useful? If this is just a pathology, we'd better to get rid of definitively. But have we the choice? First question. Second question, how does it work? And third question, the more interesting, can we use it? I'm aware that I'm not really in the logic of a religious person who doesn't think necessarily about using religion. I confess I'm quite an atheist in this point. So, first question, can we get rid of religion anyway? Perhaps religion is part of our metabolism. Perhaps it is in our brain. And indeed, there are some new field of investigation in science called neurotheology. Neurotheology is about the neural basis of religion. So there are a lot of technologies which are developed to create and develop religious experience. The first one in the 60s was psychedelic drugs. You all know about the 60s. I will not present you more about the hippies, the beatnik, Woodstock, the morphine. The 2 guys you see there, this is the poet, the beatnik poet William Burroughs, and his friend Brian Tracy testing a machine to have hallucination and religious experience. It's called the dream machine. It's just a light bulb and something running around, and this project, you kind of stroboscope. And sometimes, for some people, you have some religious experience, some hallucinatory experience with this. Not me. Never worked on that.
7 hertz.
Excuse me?
You need the right frequency, 7 hertz.
I tried a lot of frequency. But binaural beats with sound, it's working, so you see. Okay. Another scientist called Pearce tried to create a machine which is based on transmagnetic cranial stimulation. They send you some electric field or magnetic field on the brain. And he claims that you have some feeling of a presence when you use these machines and a kind of religious experience of the presence of a God. Many people have tested this machine. For instance, Sussan Blackmore, who is a psychologist, an English psychologist, said, well, this is one of the most important experiences
I never. Richard Dawkins, I don't present you Richard Dawkins, has also tested the machine, and he said, I felt nothing. So you see, this is the problem with all these things, whether psychedelic drugs, whether machines, whether dream machines. They work for some people, they don't for others, because we all know, to come back to the 60s, not all the hippies were enlightened, far from it. So the research on neurobiology is quite complex, and the question remains: is there a good part of the brain can we activate through something the religious experience? Research shows that there is some link between this religious experience and temporal lobes. It seems also, according to somebody called Andrew Newberg, that there is a relationship between mystical experience and the part of the brain connected with how I position myself in the space. The consciousness of my limits, of my hands on this table. My hands is not the table. I am able to see my limits. You can trick this. And if you trick this, bingo, you are at one with the universe. But this also is not completely demonstrated. Other researchers have worked on, for instance, the brain of Carmen nuns, and shows that when you have a mystical experience, everything in the brain is lightened up. So there is no really good part. So if you want to understand how the religion works, we'll have to abandon the naive idea that it is just about altered states of consciousness, just about acting on the right part of the brain. It's much more complex than that. So there are also some research about evolutionary psychology of religion. Why did religion evolve? If we can understand why religion is a universal phenomenon, perhaps we can understand how it works. So we'll go a little in the past now. There is a lot of future here. Let's go 60,000 years ago. 60,000 years ago, a miracle occurred, a singularity, if you want. What happened? Before this time, human used tools. You had probably language. He was already living in societies, but he had no culture. Suddenly, in geological times, of course, not in a year, but in a little 1,000 years, art appears, religions appears. So this is, of course, completely mixed. And there is no change in the physiology of the brain at that time. When you look at the plants, the heads of the prehistoric man, there is nothing changed there. So what happened? According to somebody called Stephen Meaden, who is a cognitive archaeologist, what happened at that time was that the brain of man was already divided in various modules. For instance, you have a module to recognize faces. You have a module to speak. You have a module to make tools. You have a module to live in society. It's a famous theory of the mind. I know what you think, what I think. At that time, according to Meaden, all these modules, which were separated, began to meet. So, the modules of natural history, knowing the animals, is meeting theory of the mind, modules living in society. And you have totemism and shamanism, animal spirits. You have the modules of living in society, having a statue in the tribe, and making tools. You create suddenly jewelry. You show your statues by tools. So this is interesting. What segmenting is interesting because if you look at the etymology of the word religion, it means put in relationship. So what does it mean? For some, it's relationship between man and God, for the believers. For the non-believers, relationship between people. But it can be really mean that things in relationship. Religion is about putting things which were separated and are now put in relationship. And this created a lot of byproducts. Almost of these are, in fact, produced by the religious thought at one time of history. Music, of course. Music is part of shamanism since the beginning of time. Most of art go to Lascaux and see the first drawing, which were also probably some shamanistic drawings. Philosophy, of course. Philosophy began by philosophy of religion. Theater was created in Greece at Epidurus as a healing method and evocation of the god Asclepius. In India, there is also a theater, and it's called the fifth Veda, the fifth sacred text. And science, we frequently forget that, but all the big founders of scientific method were deeply religious persons. Isaac Newton spent most of his time doing alchemy and sometimes calculating the date of the end of the world, and sometimes he created the gravitational law also. Giordano Bruno was the first to speak about the infinity of world, was convinced that in fact it was a religious reform he was proposing. He was proposing a religious reform about the cult of infinity and the return of the Egyptian gods. So, religion is everywhere. Now some scientists begin to think, what is religion exactly? There is a consensus right now with politician, scientists of religion, is that religion is about counter-intuition. In other words, it's about things which are impossible. Wow, that's new. You have somebody called Pascal Goyer who says that, for instance, why are some religious ideas spreading on the population? It's because they mixed again, they put in relationship modules, cognitive modules, which should not. For instance, the statue able to speak. This is impossible. So people remember it, and the idea will spread. It's a kind of memetic system. Okay, this is an idea which is quite admitted in the centers, but there is a problem, and people are aware of the problem. It is the paradox of Mickey Mouse. Mickey Mouse is a counterintuitive being. There is no religion about Mickey Mouse, not yet. We'll see in a few minutes that perhaps you can do something about it. But right now, there is no religion about Mickey Mouse. So, this is not sufficient to have a counterintuitive being. So, let's go deeper in the mechanics of religion. Let's keep in mind this idea of counterintuition. What is the sacred? The sacred comes from the Latin sacre. And sacre, what does it mean? Holy, of course, but also cursed, impure. You see, already in the definition of the word sacred, you have something which is counterintuitive, which is paradoxical, which is impossible. And when you look at the history of religion, you see that paradox, indeed, is at the heart of all religion. And religious believers, the better of them, were perfectly aware of it. Credo quia absurdum. My Latin accent is even worse than my English, but all the Latin people are dead, so I don't care. Credo quia absurdum was a sentence by Tertullian, one of the fathers of the church, who was not a funny guy most of the time, but he was aware that he was believing, indeed, in something which was not really possible. And there are a lot of examples in the history of religion of reflection about paradox. For instance, one of the best historians of religion, Roberto, created the word numinus. Numinus is a Latin word which is a pompous version of the sacred. And he said that there are two tendencies in the numinus. It's mysterium tremendum, it's frightening, or it's mysterium fascinans, it's attractive. There are also another example in the traditional religion of paradox. For instance, a Buddhist, there is a strong and well logic system called Madhyamika, which is a logic including a lot of paradox and a strange way to think. It's a logic based on 4 terms and not 2. We have yes and no, it's possible or it's impossible. In Madhyamika, we have 4 terms. There is an old joke, already in Madhyamika, philosophers, you need to change a light bulb. You need 4. 1 to change the light bulb. 1 to not change the light bulb. 1 to change the light bulb and not change the light bulb. And 1 to not change the light bulb and not change the light bulb. There is another example which is quite known. It's in the Western countries. Coincidentia oppositorum. It's part of the Neoplatonic philosophy. It's part of what we call the negative theology. You begin by saying, God is not that, he's not hate, but he's not love either, and he's not great, he's not little, he's something else. And at the end, God is nothing, but he's not nothing. Against your Madhyamika. And one of the greatest philosophers of confidential opposition, I think it was even the guy who created the word, was a cardinal called Nicolas de Cusa. And it's interesting for functionalists because it was by thinking about the paradoxical aspect of God that for the first time he formulated the idea of the infinity of the universe. He said, God is infinite. So, if God is infinite, a bigger thing is not bigger than another in front of the infinite. So, if this is the case, Earth is not inferior to the world of angel. And if it is not inferior to the world of angel, then Earth cannot be at the bottom of the world. So, Earth is alone, is in an infinite universe. He was the first to say that. And he had a disciple with Giordano Bruno. Giordano Bruno was burned at a stake by the church, but one of his main influence was a cardinal. Life is not simple. Now, when people speak about spirituality, they say, yes, okay, there are impossible things, strange beliefs, but there is at least one rational religion, something we can perfectly understand, and it is Zen Buddhism. Buddhism is simple. Buddhism is just a technology. You sit and you meditate, and while meditating, you have a revelation of the truth of the universe. Unfortunately, it's not again so simple. You have 2 schools in Zen Buddhism. One of the main schools use a meditation device called koan. What is the koan? The koan is a strange question with an even more strange reply. For instance, why did Bodhidharma, under Zen Buddhism, go to the West? And the master replied, "Nu." What does it mean? Not something like that. Or replies, 2 bottles of milk. And the monk, the Buddhist monk, will meditate on this story during hours about an absurd story, something completely irrational and devoid of sense. No, you will tell me there is another Buddhist school, Soto Zen. Those guys are serious. They just meditate. They don't use Quran. Okay. What are the founders of Soto Zen saying? They say, when you meditate in the Zen posture, you are in the nature of Buddha. You don't have to reach the level of the Buddha. You are already the Buddha. So the ordinary consciousness is already the Buddha. And you have to sit hours to have an ordinary consciousness which is already the Buddha. Don't call this a Quran if you want, but this is completely paradoxical too. Now, another level of thinking. Okay, there is paradox in religion, but this will not change my life. It's not so important. It's just playing with words and playing with logic. But when you enter the field of religion, you are using embodied logic. You are using the logic of your behavior, the logic of the oldest part of the brain, not the newer part, which can sit down, calm, and say, yeah, it's paradoxical. You enter in something much more primitive. For instance, we spoke about altered state of consciousness, things like that. What do they mean? Why are those so important? That's because they put in a relationship various modes of consciousness which should not meet, mainly the dream state and the waking state. You can enter lucidly in a dream. That's the first thing. You can make the dream enter in your life by using, for instance, drugs, or even more simpler, you use a ritual. What is a ritual? Is a series of actions which makes no sense in the common world. There are many units in a ritual. That's interesting. When you are doing a ritual, there is a part of your brain called the amygdala, which lightens up. What is the amygdala? Mostly it's about fear. There is a danger. Why is there a danger? Because I begin to act in a strange way. I begin to speak in strange language. It's not common. Danger. Amygdala is waking up. But in the same way, you have to lose control. You lose the part of your brain that I spoke earlier about, your limited space. So you lose control and there is danger. You have this mix again between two modes of consciousness, between two kinds of behavior. That's why a famous rock and industrial musician and magician called Genesis Theory said that ritual is a behavioral cut-up. Cut-up is the technique used by William Burroughs, the big poet I showed you his photo earlier. It's about taking a part of a text and mixing with another part of the text. William Burroughs was indeed convinced that it was a magical technique and a ritual technique. And Genesis Theory went further by saying ritual is about cut-up in behavior. Now, why is paradox important? Many people working on this idea have the basic theory that you have some thought, and by going non-linear, by going paradoxical, you access to some kind of mystical state where you can see the thing outside thought. Personally, I don't believe that. Perhaps because I'm not a mystic. I think that something else occurs. I think that when you put some paradox in action, you don't reach a synthesis like Hegel would have said. You create a problem, you create a cognitive dissonance. And to solve this cognitive dissonance, you have to create new kind of thoughts. I will show you an example. A recent research in psychology. The psychologist take a team of subjects and said, read this short story of Kafka called The Country Doctor, which is a very non-linear, difficult to understand story. And they took another group and they gave them also the story of Kafka, but edited. It was simpler, it was linear. Then they make some tests about their capacity to find patterns in a suite of letters and numbers. And those who have read the complex version of Kafka novel were able to see much more easier the various patterns. So when you are in front of a paradox, your brain suddenly begins to work. And when it works, you begin to find things. That's perhaps the adaptive effect of religion. Religions make you smarter. It can make you crazier, but it makes you smarter. Now, what do we do from that? We have perhaps a tool, paradox, and embodied logic to embodied paradox in order to create a new kind of intelligence enhancement tool. Let's see what happened today in various counterculture or subculture trying to use the idea of religion in order to create new kind of thinking. You have, for instance, again amongst the hippies, the idea of discordianism, the cult of the Eris goddess. Eris is the goddess of chaos. And this was a religion created in the 60s and was not oaks disguised in religion. It was a religion disguised as a oaks, as a fantasy. You have some occult current like chaos magic. Chaos magicians are playing with belief. For instance, Peter Carroll, one of the most well-known chaos magicians, say just play each morning with a dice, and according to the number you find, you will be for the day atheist, polytheist, monotheist, and you continue to have this belief during the whole day. And tomorrow, you change your belief. You experiment with belief. There are also the Cthulhu cults. Cthulhu is interesting. It's the Lovecraft mythos, the god of science fiction story of Howard Phillips Lovecraft. Lovecraft was a perfect materialist and rationalist. He wasn't believing at all in what he said. But many people have found that indeed the gods of the Cthulhu mythos were perfectly fitting with modern consciousness. So they have a cult for Cthulhu, for Nyarlathotep, for Yog-Sothoth, and all these gods of the Lovecraftian cult. Somebody has said, I don't remember who, that the interest of Lovecraftian god is that they connect our primitive instinct to our post-human future. So you see, there is something very post-human in the Lovecraftian cults. There was even at some time a website called Necronomicon Transhumanism. And the member of the site said we are like Leonardo da Vinci, but with tentacles. Other kids are very, very interesting. Other kids are people living today who think that they are not human. They are, for instance, and mostly, by the way, vampires. Or they are dragons. Or they are elves. And they build their identity on this fictional identity. So you see, are they crazy? I don't think they are crazy. Are they playing a little, but they are serious about playing? And after all, if I say I'm French, this is just a fictitious identity. Of course, I don't speak a good English, but besides that, this is not something real. Why, if I feel more like a dragon, shouldn't I can say I'm a dragon? The interesting thing about other kids, especially vampires, is that they take their mythology from games and role-playing games. Vampires are influenced by a game called Vampires the Masquerade. And this is interesting because you have a field currently very successful called the alternate reality game thing. Alternate reality game is simply playing with the nature of reality by putting mainly on the web, but also with mails, phone calls, the story, a fictional story, which come to the people by various means. It is the contrary of video games. Video games, you go in a virtual world, but here the virtual world is coming to you. For instance, you have the Rock Band 9 Inch Nails who have created an alternate reality game for one of their albums. What did they do? Simply, they put some phone numbers on their t-shirts, some website, and people begin to explore this website and this phone number and discover a story. So it's kind of conspiracy theory, but used in an intelligent way as a game, as a creation of reality. And what is interesting is that alternative game players are very, very involved in their games. They almost believe in it. And one specialist of these games, called Jane McGonigal, has said that the interesting part of alternate reality games is that people are doing a performance of belief. They don't believe, they are doing a performance of belief. But by doing this performance of belief, they enter completely into the alternative story. This is like a ritual, a modern logic. They perform the belief, so they believe at the end. There was a very interesting prototype of alternate reality game called Incunabula Pearce in the 90s. And somebody has said about this game that, you see, it's also very reminiscent of cult-like initiation, but very different in the sense that they are looking for a very unique personality type. A person who is hedonistic, open-minded but skeptical, spiritual, scientifically minded, creative, free-spirited, educated, critical, not the typical initiate of the standard cult. This is interesting. This shows that you can use all the mechanics of religion to create somebody who is, by all means, more rational, more intelligent, more free-minded. So, with this in mind, we can begin to think about creating our own new religions. They will look much more like games than common religion. But they will not be only entertainment. You will be serious about playing. By the way, any player knows that he is always very serious about playing. It's the most serious thing in the world. So, future religion may not be about belief. They may not even be about futuristic promise. I don't think it's a good idea to say, for instance, the spiritual promise of transhumanism is immortality. We don't know. If you begin to promise things to people, you make them enter in a path which may be dangerous. But if you use religion as an intelligence enhancement tool, as a way to think more and not to think less, it might become interesting. So I will finish by asking this question. Our future engineered religion, this question is from William Benbury, the Hollywood of neurotechnology. Today, there are a lot of studies and new tools about using our nervous system. We spoke about drugs, we spoke about machines. There are now some toys about taking your brain waves and playing with them and something like that. So there is a new neurotechnology waiting for its media. Perhaps the paradoxical storytelling of religion will be a way to create a new media for neurotechnology, as cinema has been the new media of moving image. So, here is my answer to your question.
We are so busy with the PowerPoint presentation of the Pearce, which should be available in 1 minute, that we're going to allow 2 questions to them. What is the Pearce?
I'm very happy to hear mention of alternate reality games here, because you touch on that exact point, which is that this implies by entering under different rules of these games, and I don't think games is the right word here. I don't think it's a complete enough word.
We should find a new reality.
Yes. What we're going to almost possibly see is a fracturing or a fractalization of the consensus reality that most are inhabiting at the moment, let's say. And that's only going to become more prevalent as more and more people start using augmented reality, which again I think is not a correct term for the technology. A more apt term for this would be, let's say, digital aura recognition, recognition of metadata around us. As people are able to start to customize their own interactions with the world around us, we will see a multiplicity of realities and the connections between them. So thank you. I appreciate this perspective a lot.
Yes. Earlier in your presentation, you're speaking about how religion has this very intrinsic, paradoxical thing going on, and how, you know, St. Koan's induce paradox into our brains, you know, all that. Anyway, my question is, do you think with things like artificial intelligence, do you think the presence and further understanding and manipulation of paradoxes would be an integral part of the proper development of anything that can be called artificial intelligence? In other words, do you think it is a requisite for, do you think that paradox is a requisite in the artificial intelligence recipe?
I think it must be, I'm not sure of course, but I think it might be a good field of research, in fact. A good field of research, a good direction of research to create paradoxical artificial intelligence. Might be interesting. How can we program it? Before even asking how to, if it is important, we ask how to program them. It's already very interesting to see how can we code paradox. In a meaningful way, of course, because if you make explode the machine, it's not a good way to do
it. Okay, so going to have the last talk of the morning session. I have been fighting against the PowerPoint presentation to decide who is the next one. And we are going to move Anders Sandberg as first speaker of the afternoon session. And the next talk, let me see if the PDF works, because as you can see, we are doing everything in real time here. So first, before announcing David, I want to make sure that it works. So to see it good, I have to do a PDF display. Let's see. Okay. So the next speaker is a very well-known transhumanist writer. He's Well known for many things, including being one of the two co-founders of the late line with the World Transhumanist Association, who today goes by the name of Humanity Plus, I believe. The author of the Hedonistic Imperative, a very good friend of many people here. I'd like to give the floor to David Pearce for the next presentation.
Thank you, Judo. Very good to be here. I was originally going to call this talk, Is Darwinian Life Worth Conserving? But I think the organisers were a little worried that this sounded too apocalyptic. After all, I'm a negative utilitarian. I do think we have an overriding responsibility to get rid of all forms of suffering. Yes, I not merely advocate, but tentatively predict that we are going to, in future, enjoy gradients of genetically pre-programmed well-being, orders of magnitude richer than we enjoy, than is even technically feasible today. What I am going to do is just set a bit of context. The abolitionist project, essentially outline the challenge, why I think that suffering is the most morally urgent problem we face. I hope everyone here is not in pain or angst-ridden or suffering severe depression, but many millions of people today are suffering extreme pain. Each year, perhaps almost 1 million people in the world take their own lives, mainly through depression, and in addition, hundreds of millions more suffer subclinical depression, malaise. For them, the problem is not the transhumanist problem. Many transhumanists would like to live, not forever, at least indefinitely. For many millions of people, the problem is that life hangs heavy. Even if one does think that suffering is the most important problem that we face, it doesn't necessarily mean that we should embark on an all-out direct assault. One might, for instance, think that given that humans are the only species capable of rewriting our own source code and that of our animal cousins and abolishing suffering, that our focus, let's say, should be on existential risk. Think of Nick Bostrom and his colleagues at the FHI. Also, consider the fraud and practice that may be possible in the future to build a paradise radiance of intelligent bliss, as I advocate, for us to see it, we must always see its form. On the very good reason, as Remi by the same token, if you believe in a so-called hard singularity, and you think that sometime in the next few decades, something like a hard singularity will occur, then a lot of what I'm going to say about the reproductive revolution, design of babies, selection pressure in favour of ever happier and more intelligent people, a lot of it will probably seem rather redundant. Now the transhumanist declaration, the commitment to the well-being of all sentients, is in one sense very specific, and in another sense it's very vague, at least non-specific. It doesn't commit us to any particular ethical theory. I happen to be a classical utilitarian, technically a negative utilitarian, but one can support, endorse the well-being of all sentients and be paleontologist or virtue theorist, like the founder of the modern transhumanist movement, Max more. This is quite consistent with a diversity of ethical perspectives. Because what I'm going to be suggesting is that it's going to be feasible to raise the normal hedonic set point around which our lives fluctuate. And in future, instead of today's gradients, sometimes most people feeling quite good, sometimes feeling quite bad, I'm saying that it is likely in the wake of the reproductive revolution there is going to be strong selection pressure against many of our nastier genes that predispose to depression, malaise, and many states that were adaptive in the ancestral environment. So, okay, prediction one, the world's last experience below hedonic zero in our forward light cone will be a precisely datable event several hundred years hence. Now, in some ways I'm quite pessimistic and bioconservative. I alluded to singularity, and if you're a singularitarian and think it's going to be possible to scan, digitize and upload ourselves into a computer, then this may be feasible much, much faster. But everything I'm going to talk about is feasible with existing technologies or recognizable extensions thereof. Prediction two, which certainly isn't in the transhumanist declaration, is nonetheless, it has to be much more tentative. It's my own personal tentative prediction. I think post-human life will be animated by gradients of intelligent bliss. Subjectively hyper-valuable experiences, orders of magnitude richer than human peak experiences. And clearly I'm not going to be able to say much about the possible propositional content or the sensory modes of post-humans. What I am predicting is that this background hedonic tone will be part of the feature of everyday life and make it subjectively far more valuable than anything that is even physiologically possible today. Okay, just, if I might briefly just set out the challenge. If we are to abolish all forms of suffering. Physical pain, it would be nice to say that after the development of general anesthesia and powerful narcotic painkillers, no one needs suffer physical pain anymore. But in practice, they do. And if one ever is in extreme physical pain, it can be shocking just how bad it is. It's not inevitable. There are a very small number of people who suffer from congenital analgesia, and unfortunately, yes, they tend to lead relatively short lives because they lack the signaling properties of pain. Then there is psychological pain. I alluded earlier to the hedonic treadmill. Now, most of us as transhumanists want many things. We want effectively not eternal youth, at least indefinite youth. We want morphological freedom. We want intelligence amplification. A whole range of wonderful technologies like this. But there is quite a lot of evidence that even if all of these promises are delivered, we won't actually be significantly better off emotionally, our quality of life, than our hunter-gatherer ancestors on the African savannah. Such is the nature of the hedonic treadmill. I mean, one might think now that with all the medical advances, technology, that the incidence of depression, suicide, mental illness was going to be it's going to be much rarer. But of course, sadly this isn't the case. Okay, that's our own species, but I think we need to guard against anthropocentric bias, just as we need to guard against ethnocentric bias. And at the moment, over 50 billion factory farm non-human animals suffer prolonged discomfort, pain, in many cases depression, and very nasty deaths each year. Then there is our domestic cats. Now, as you may know, cats kill small birds and birds in a variety of rather nasty ways. No, it's not perhaps, you might think, a priority, but nonetheless, if one is actually serious about taking the project, the Abolitionist project seriously, commitment to well-being of all sentients, one would need to do that. And perhaps most technically challenging of all is the living world, read in tooth and claw. A lot of us have a rather amplified conception of what nature amounts to, but as I say these words, sadly millions of creatures are starving, dying of thirst, being eaten alive by predators, and this might seem, to many people, a technically insuperable problem. Now I'm going to skim through the next slides. This is unfortunately the young fellow here with congenital analgesia died at the age of 14 after jumping off a tall building to impress his young friends. He didn't feel pain. The hedonic treadmill I mentioned earlier. Meat production. Yes, unfortunately, pigs, for instance, have not really got the intelligence of a human, a 2-year-old perhaps, but they also have the sentience too. Obligate carnivores like cats. Wildlife, it's worth quoting, the total amount of suffering per year in the natural world is beyond all decent contemplation, says Dawkins. Okay, technical solutions. One might imagine that something like physical pain is extraordinarily complicated, and indeed a number of genes do modulate our emotional response to pain, but within the next few decades we're going to be able to choose the level of pain sensitivity of ourselves and our future offspring, because it seems that variants of the SCN9A allele determine whether one feels any pain at all. Nonsense mutations mean that one is completely insensitive to physical pain. Other variants actually amplify the pain response, and other variants, other alleles, diminish pain sensitivity. And it's worth asking yourself, if you had the choice, either for yourself or for your future children, which alleles, what allele would you choose? Now, a future of no pain whatsoever, I think, is going to depend on advances in neuroprosthetics and also probably an ethical, ideological revolution to match. But nonetheless, there is likely to be, at least amongst responsible parents choosing the genetic makeup of their future offspring, tremendous selection pressure against the nastier variants of the SCN9A gene. I mentioned that I think it's going to be possible to abolish all forms of suffering. I mean, this isn't just utopian dreaming. Two possible long-term solutions here. One is some kind of prostheses, such that a small child, for instance, automatically will withdraw his or her arm in the presence of a noxious stimuli. Presumably one would want this device to have a manual override. Or alternatively, it would in theory be possible to have information-sensitive gradients of physical bliss. Though that is much more speculative. Okay, now I'm going on now to psychological pain. It is going to be technically feasible to abolish all forms of psychological pain, but if we want to preserve intelligent well-being, it's important that we're not talking about uniform bliss. We're going to need to recalibrate the hedonic treadmill. Right now, if we wanted to, we could enjoy lives of intense bliss and euphoria. Simplifying a bit, if we were to wire ourselves up electrodes in the pleasure centres. It's notable that wire-heading, direct electrical stimulation of the brain shows no physiological tolerance. It's just as rewarding after hours or weeks. One or two complications here in that wire-heading seems particularly to activate the dopamine system involving desire and anticipation, whereas the actual roots of pure bliss seem to lie in the new opioid system. But in future we will be able to choose both the level of motivation and the level of bliss that we enjoy. Why isn't wire-heading or something functionally analogous to wire-heading a plausible long-term future? One or two bad arguments and one or two good arguments. A bad argument would be it's offensive to human dignity or something like that, whereas if you compare, say, sex and what people get up to in the bedroom with wire-heading, I don't think the dignity argument comes into it. Nonetheless, I don't see wire-heading or anything like it as a plausible version of our future. Essentially, it brings the whole experiment of life and the universe to an end. It's impossible to be an intelligent wirehead. It's not probably ecologically, demographically sustainable. There would be selection pressure against wireheads. Clearly, wireheads are not going to be motivated to have baby wireheads. So, as I said, it's useful as an existence proof for people who are sceptical that it's possible to live lives of indefinite bliss, but nonetheless I don't think it's the way forward. Okay, psychological pain. One possible route forward is designer drugs. Now, we know the problem with today's recreational drugs is that what happens is that they can be very enjoyable. They just kick into gear the brain's negative feedback mechanisms with a vengeance. So I don't think that they are the way forward. Current clinical drugs for treatment of low mood and anxiety, again, extremely mediocre. Even innumerable, apparently rigorous, placebo-controlled, double-blind, prospective, yada yada studies have been beset by publication bias, and one of the reasons they are so mediocre, aside from the power of big pharma, is that they are designed to minimise so-called abuse potential. Clearly, in theory, it would be possible in future to have some version of soma or super soma. Unfortunately, in Brave New World, Huxley deliberately sought to alienate the reader from just how wonderful a truly ideal pleasure drug could be. Soma, recall, was this emotionally ideal pleasure drug, but it was a very shallow form of well-being, not life-enriching. It wasn't integrated into one's life history or life narrative. It was a very suboptimal form of drug, and yet, yes, in theory, designer drugs in future, many people may choose to use them. Something that doesn't show indefinite tolerance, there's no propensity to dose escalation. But if what we're serious about getting rid of suffering, it's worth asking such questions as, do you seriously want to medicate our children from birth? Wouldn't it be better if they were genetically predisposed naturally to experience gradients of well-being? So here we come to what I see as the long-term future. We're on the brink of a reproductive revolution. At the moment, it's not much more exciting than choosing the gender of one's future child, but in future one will be able to choose the level of the hedonic set point of one's child. Now, I'm probably speaking as though I'm some kind of genetic determinist, which I'm not, but nonetheless, twin studies, for instance, show that mood, whether one is temperamentally happy or depressive, does show a very high degree of genetic loading, and already we know single variants, such as variants of the catecholomethyltransferase gene that predispose to whether or not one is essentially has a rich rewarding life or a much less rewarding life. And so it's worth asking oneself, okay, this isn't rigorous or anything like that, but imagine if you were choosing the genetic makeup of your future child. I mean, yes, you might choose to play genetic roulette as now, trust Mother Nature, shuffle the genetic dice, which I think is personally is irresponsible given the terrible things that can happen. Or you can actually choose the, crudely speaking, the hedonic set point of your future offspring. And I think most parents will want to choose maybe not super happy children, but children who are predisposed to lead happy lives. Some parents say that all they care about is that their children are happy. I'm actually quite sceptical about this. Parents care about many things other than happiness, but happiness is a winning strategy. Happy children tend to be successful. So I think there is going to be tremendous selection pressure in the future in favour of happier children. After all, I mean, why do many people suffer from low mood, depression, maybe not full-blown clinical disorders, but just get so little out of life? Well, I think one has to look back to the ancestral environment. In the ancestral environment, an environment full of predators, it was genetically adaptive for vulnerable primates to congregate in groups, but nonetheless, if you were a delta or a beta male, it was actually probably, so evolutionary psychiatrists tell us, adaptive to, in many cases, keep one's head down, not to have confrontations with the alpha male. If you decided to square off against Big Boris, yes, you might get damaged or driven out of the tribe. And so, yes, it seems as though depression, just to give one example, a very nasty state, is the internalized correlate of a losing subroutine. But there's no reason why we have to replicate the African savannah. In the future, it's going to be possible for us all to lead rich lives. Yes, sociologically, there are going to be many problems if everyone is naturally happy, because whereas depressive people tend to be subordinate and submissive, happy people are more likely to be active citizens. And that's a big, big topic. Although I'm focusing on mood and hedonic tone, I very much want to stress that with the reproductive revolution, that it's going to be possible to choose how empathetic we are, personality variables such as agreeableness too. Okay. Cool. Now, what's the time? I want to keep some kind of time. What's the time? What's the time I want to?
Giulio, how much time left? It is 1:30.
If other speakers are comfortable, I don't know we are, because I'll go as fast as I'm just checking. I don't want to trespass on anyone's time. That's anything. Okay, meat eating. I mentioned earlier that pigs, for instance, have the intelligence and, just as important, the sentience of a 2-year-old, so I would say a 2.5-year-old child. Now, if we treated human toddlers in the way we treated animals on our factory farms and slaughterhouses, then a crime would be taking place on the scale of the Holocaust. That's not idle rhetoric. So, we've got to assume, or at least hope, that there is some fundamental difference between members of our own species, toddlers, and pigs. And intuitively, if one sees a toddler and one sees a pig, clearly one responds much more strongly, caringly, emotionally to a toddler, human toddler, than one does a pig. but the level of intelligence and sentience is very much the same. So, well, as I personally think that if one takes the transhumanist declaration seriously, a commitment to the well-being of all sentients, then one ought to adopt a cruelty-free diet. However, I'm not. This isn't the start of a long talk on animal rights or animal ethics. What instead I'm going to suggest is that I think a two-track strategy is appropriate, that one needs a fallback option, that as we know, humans have an enormous capacity to rationalise self-interest, and hence I think it's vitally important that we explore and develop technologies of cultured meat, in vitro meat, because if one can develop cultured meat, lab-grown and cruelty-free meat of a taste and texture that is indistinguishable from that of, let's say, gourmet steaks, then in effect one can, given it will be scalable, then one could in principle have global veganism. Not perhaps veganism in the technical sense, given that people will still be eating meat, but not meat from intact animals and not animals who would suffer. The world's first in vitro meat organisation, New Harvest, was founded a few years ago, which I would thoroughly commend. And I actually see this as not something purely incidental or minor, but I really do see this as a priority if we're serious about getting rid of suffering. I won't go into detail now, but yes, in the long term, if one were to get rid of suffering, one would need to deal with the problem of obligate carnivores, and most controversial of all, perhaps, is the question of suffering in the living world. Now, in the case of human serial killers, we recognise that they have to be locked up, but our attitude to non-human serial killers, to lions, snakes and crocodiles is, well, it's natural. So, how on earth, if one is serious about getting rid of suffering, is going to deal with this problem? One solution is to phase out carnivores altogether. But this needn't involve actual species extinction. What in principle it can involve is genetic reprogramming, tweaking, because later this century the only large mammals that are going to exist in our wildlife parks are going to exist in our wildlife parks thanks to habitat destruction. And so we're going to essentially have to choose what forms of consciousness we want to exist in the living world. Do we want to see continuing disembowelment, asphyxiation, being eaten alive? Now, okay, these are just words to us, but what does it actually feel like to be asphyxiated? Anyone who's, a number of people have been rather dismissive of waterboarding and CIA interrogation techniques, just a dunk in the water, but in practice the feeling of asphyxiation is absolutely horrible. So, yes, if we are serious, we would need to run our wildlife parks on compassionate grounds. It can't be done in a purely piecemeal fashion. Clearly, without carnivores preying on the weak and the innocent and the vulnerable, there would be a population explosion of herbivores. So one would need to use long-acting depot contraception, fertility control, global surveillance, the kind of cradle to the grave welfare state for non-human animals. Once again, you probably don't, most people wouldn't feel this is a priority, but the technology is going to be there, computational resources are going to be there, if we think wild animal suffering is a problem. So I'm not going to go here into singularity scenarios. I said a number of transhumanists and others would see the solution as scanning and uploading ourselves. I'm personally a skeptic for reasons I won't go into here. But even if this were to be the case, are we going to systematically, comprehensively practice destructive uploading? This strikes me as sociologically unlikely, and so we're still going to have the problems and the horrific suffering of the meat world. So here we go. Where does it all stop? Now, well, we could simply phase out suffering and be happy with by contemporary standards, a high quality of life. And that, to my mind, is the overriding priority. But I see no long-term reason why we can't amplify the biological substrates of well-being so that we can essentially access gradients of super happiness. Sorry, here we go. Now, what do these rather perhaps unprepossessing mice have to tell us about a future of super happiness? Well, if one were to go down the genetic route, this is an example of a mouse that is, in a sense, physically super strong. Well, it's possible to create humans and post-humans who are super happy by dint of adding extra copies of your gene, overexpressing certain genes like that. Unfortunately, it's not just a matter of turning up the volume, because clearly one doesn't want people who are clinically manic. But even today, if one actually looks at the happiest 1% of the population, one sees that they are capable of extremely high intellectual performance, being civilized, high performing. If anything, it's depression that leads to underperformance. Now, I could say a great deal more, but I'm going to bring this to a close now and perhaps take any questions, if anyone has any questions. Who's going to decide? Julia, do you want to choose?
I'm not doing a something usual.
I'll go nearest to the. I'll go yes, assistant right.
Okay. With the animals, let's say you can make it so that lions no longer have this drive to kill things in order to eat. Then you have to replace you have to create meat that is not, sentient in nature. But so if you redesign theoretically the entire planet to support that kind of happiness, under the notion that we shouldn't stop at being humans, like all sentient life should be spared or from pain. Would that mean that should we even stop at our planet?
Good question. It is possible that primordial Darwinian life exists elsewhere in the universe, in which case I would say if it's within our forward light cone, we have an obligation to launch cosmic rescue missions. In practice, I suspect that the principle of mediocrity dictates that we are alone in our Hubble volume, not because we're special, but the actual conditions necessary for the creation of information-bearing self-replicators seem to be thermodynamically extremely improbable. However, I could be totally wrong, that's my personal opinion, and I suspect within the next few decades we'll have a better understanding of how life first arose, whether it is plausible that any life, or certainly any complex life, exists in our forward light code. If it does exist, then yes, I think we've got an obligation to do something about it.
Thank you.
You are an idealist. You are most idealist person probably I know. You have a very high. The problem, however, is there's this one example in history of idealism running amok and having been vilified as communism. So there's a historical precedent of a society, of shaping society, communism, that has allegedly failed, or one experiment allegedly failed. Now you propose a sort of idealism which certain political parts of society would object to, by definition, referring to examples that idealism failed. So there were earlier examples with idealism. So by implicit, your idealism must fail, or your idealism is suspect. There is a division in society between certain groups which are very suspicious about idealism, or other groups which are apathic about idealism. Maybe all alternatives of this. How do you create, in the current system we're in, the current status quo, political status quo, how do you create a debate of even getting close to this? I would be in favor of getting close to this, but many people would like to be violent to you.
If this were mere utopian dreaming, it wouldn't be particularly interesting. It would just be philosophizing about it. What I think is the abolitionist project, Clause 7 of the Transhumanist Declaration, its intellectual fight, is that technology suggests that these dilemmas are actually going to be confronting us. And the case of, for instance, choosing the economic set point of one's future children. It won't necessarily be the case of some grandiose species project. It could well simply be the case that in 20, 30 years' time, individual parents choosing the genetic makeup of their future children and having to decide whether they want kids who are predisposed to depression, anxiety disorders, or malaise. What are the ways things can go wrong? Yes, this is precisely why I think we need debate, intelligent debate, discussion now. How do we avoid a kind of botched utopia? I think if one actually eradicates the biological signature of suffering, the notion of things going wrong actually changes, but nonetheless it's certainly possible to envisage us getting trapped in some suboptimal rut, something better than the chamber of horrors we have today, but nonetheless not maximising what Bostrom calls maximising our axiological potential. And fancy philosopher's word we tend to use sometimes. But yes, I don't regard it as premature to have this debate. On the contrary, it's worth noting that even some of the things I've been discussing, probably most people, including some transhumanists, will probably start rolling their eyes when one talks of non-human animal suffering, reprogramming predators. But Jeff McMahon's piece in the New York Times a few weeks ago, the first print published piece by a mainstream academic actually calling for carnivores in the long run to be phased out. So these issues are going to be discussed, even if we do choose to maintain the Darwinian status quo. It's going to be an act of conscious decision, because I mentioned habitat destruction, for instance, our wildlife parks, we're going to have to choose what kinds of life form, what kinds of life we want to exist. Already in a sort of low-key way, for instance, it's considered now feeding live rodents to snakes in zoos, which now isn't done because people say it's barbaric, but exactly the same kinds of dilemma are going to exist in in our wildlife parks later this century. Yes.
Yes. Last. So you said that, for instance, so well understood that happy people could be more up to engage in activism, social activism, while depressed people could be more submissive or are more submissive. But I'm asking myself if we can have exactly the opposite situation in the sense that isn't it possible that people are depressed and sad because are submitted, and some people are happy because of a high position in social stratification? I mean, I recognize that there could be some biological, the biology play a role in this, but maybe also all social and sociological categories like social stratification, social hierarchy produce sufferance, sufferance and happiness. So these two categories cannot be, I mean, strictly related in the sense that I want to be even more clear. I met some people that said, I can't be happy. I asked, why you're not happy? But I can't be happy if I don't see other people happy around me. But I found also the other opposite type of people. I said, I can be happy only if I see people suffering around me because I want to have more than them. I'll be happy when I have a better car, a better house, a nicer girlfriend or boyfriend. So there are also this type of people which are quite sadistic and they need sufferers to be happy. So how can we sort out this? I mean, probably you met people like that in your life. Don't we need both things?
Insofar as depression and depressive states are functionally useful, in theory one could have the functional analogues of depression and anxiety disorder, whatever absolute level of well-being. Rather, is this saying information is a difference that makes a difference. So long as we conserve informational sensitivity to reward and to noxious stimuli, it's impossible to enjoy extremely high functioning well-being just from a much higher hedonic plateau. You rightly, I have clearly been extremely, in one sense, simplistic during this talk. I have focused on the biological. I'm sure you'll forgive me if for not exploring some of the social dimensions for pressure of time. But yes, it's clearly going to be a twin track matter, progress of enhancing biological substrates, but also reform of the society and social structures.
Oh, it's just...
Thank you. The French colleague that have a question.
Yeah, I think we don't want to take much time from break, and we should be thanking the time. You're still hero there. So this is the end of the morning session. I hope to see you all here again at 3. The few changes we have made in the afternoon session. First, that we moved the talk of understanding. Then it's going to be a presentation of the Polytopia project by Giulio Borghini. Very interesting. Then around the tune. And we have a nice poetry song by Fiorella Berenzia Gran Finale. I'll stay here. I hope to see you here at 3.